tuning in and watching my live stream. I'm Mr. Matt, and this is Dr. Todd. Would you like a cookie, Dr. Todd? Start class, very good. And welcome to SAT, ACT Prep. So today's our writing skills section day. So we're going to talk about punctuation topics, semicolons and colons. We're going to go through three rules, three, four-ish rules. The last one actually pertains to commas, but it's a distinction when you use a semicolon versus a pair of commas with a transitional phrase. There's two different rules, and one has to do with commas, one has to do with semicolons. So technically four rules, but one of them is a commas rule that you need to be aware of. And then we're going to go through two distinct rules for colons and an overview between the two punctuation marks and how they differ, because they are not the same thing. A lot of people think that they can be used interchangeably, but actually there are pretty specific rules that govern the usage of both of them, and they're not overlapping. They usually don't overlap. There are rare circumstances where it's questionable, and it's up to the author's choice or the writer's choice which mark to use. However, in most circumstances, there are pretty strict rules that govern them, the two usages. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Oh, and also, for the session that we missed, the math session that we missed this week, I'm going to be doing an additional session this evening. So if you want to, I put a description of that in the live chat feed. So if you want to turn on your notifications by hitting the bell, you'll be notified when I go live. So if you want to drop in for that session, but otherwise the recording will be available as it regularly is right after we end the live stream. So check that out. Just FYI, and that'll lead us up, that'll get us on track to finishing the third session tomorrow. So we'll be right on time again. All right, so just a reminder, this is a live stream, so there's a little bit of a delay with the iPad, but just let me know if you have any questions, and I'll keep track of that in the screen. There seems to be a really long delay. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to just refresh this for 1 second. Sorry. It's being super long today. So let's see if we can fix that. Okay, let's see if that helps. My apologies. Okay, so that should be coming up any second. There we go. All right, rule number one. So a semicolon can be used to separate two independent clauses that are linked in meaning or closely related. So authors can use the semicolon to indicate that two sentences are related, or if they are naturally, if it's obvious to the reader that these two ideas are related to each other, then you can link them, punctuate them with a semicolon. It's important to know that the semicolon can be overused quite easily. So when you're actually writing pieces, you don't want to just put a semicolon for no reason just because the two sentences are related. Oftentimes in writing sentences that are consecutive to one another or next to each other in a paragraph are going to be related in some sort because there's an overarching argument that the author is trying to make. So it's not just that anywhere two sentences are related, you should have a semicolon. They are used for specific purposes and in order to draw emphasis or contrast between ideas. So, for example, I have a dog, semicolon, she has a cat. So these sentences are related because they're both talking about the pets that we have, and we're comparing my pets to someone else's pets. Or I don't like mushrooms on pizza, semicolon, he loves them. So again, contrasting what I like as toppings, pizza toppings, versus somebody else, so they're closely related in meaning. If there's any questions at any point, then please let me know. Rule number two, a semicolon should be placed, a semicolon should replace commas in a series that already contains commas. So, for example, and that means between the items. So, for example, I have vacationed in Miami In the comments section, in the comments lesson that we went through 2 weeks ago, we learned that city-state combinations that occur mid-sentence need to be surrounded by commas, either two commas or two dashes, and never an intermixing of the two. Either a pair of commas or a pair of dashes has to surround the state in a city-state combination. Here, notice that we have a listing, a comma series of locations that I vacationed in, but the items have commas in them. They already have, they're naturally punctuated with commas between the city and states. So, if I didn't have semicolons here, this list would seem as if there was 6 places that I vacationed in, when in reality it was only 3, just a city-state label. This is pretty straightforward. There are some really confusing combinations that can occur. Like I believe that there's like a Moscow, Tennessee, and so if you didn't have that second word of Tennessee, you might think that it's the Moscow in Russia. Or there's a lot of other double-labeled cities, and especially international cities versus American cities. There's combinations like that where if you don't have the full city-state label, then it can be really confusing. Second example, that doesn't have to just be with city-state. So in the second example, there are shipments arriving in Philadelphia, comma, District 1, semicolon, Arlington, comma, District 2, semicolon, Roanoke, comma, District 3, semicolon, and Atlanta, comma, District 4. So notice that if it's between labels, either the city label and then some type of adjunct miscellaneous label, like here we have the city and then we have the district number that is part of some type of internal labeling system, whatever. It's ambiguous. But regardless, it's in this format. But it's not as if the Philadelphia location is different than District 1. They're all in the same. They pertain to the same item. They just have multiple words in their name or in their label. So you need to separate the items almost like a list within a list. So you separate the items from each other with semicolons. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can either drop a comment below if you're watching the recording, or always feel free to type a question in the live chat function. Rule number 3. So this one kind of has a caveat. It's kind of 2 rules, but it's only 1 rule pertaining to semicolons. But in the second condition that you have to be aware of, it pertains to commas. So it's kind of like a semicolon rule and a commas rule. A semicolon is used to introduce a transitional phrase occurring between 2 independent clauses. So remember that independent clauses are complete sentences. They have a subject and a verb and a predicate. Dependent clauses cannot stand on their own as a complete sentence. They're either lacking a verb or a subject. Here, a semicolon, when it occurs when a transitional phrase like however, or although, or even though, all of those transitional phrases that break up the tempo and pace of a sentence, if they occur between 2 complete sentences, then the correct punctuation is going to be semicolon, transition, comma, and the little squiggly line there is going to be, it represents the actual sentence, whatever it is. So when it's between 2 sentences, you have the beginning first clause of the sentence, the first independent clause. I'll label that there. Then you have a semicolon, then a transition, the transitional phrase in question, then a comma after the transitional phrase, and then the second independent clause. However, when a transitional phrase occurs within one sentence, so not between 2 separate sentences, but it's interrupting the flow of one sentence, it's surrounded by either commas or dashes. It's treated as a parenthetical clause that we talked about before. But you have independent, comma, transition, dependent. Or, like I said before, we can also use dashes, although that's not as common. So when the transition occurs within one sentence, surrounded by commas or dashes, when it separates two complete sentences, use a semicolon transition, comma. So two examples there. There are three separate routes we can take, semicolon, however, this one is the shortest. So we have this transition, however, it's kind of a breaking of the tone, a tone shift, or an indication of tone shift. The transitional word, however, is occurring between two separate sentences. There are three separate routes we can take. That's an independent clause. Roots is the subject, and can take is the phrasal verb. There's also, can take is the phrasal verb there. So we have a subject, we have a verb, everything else is the predicate, so we have a complete sentence. The second clause, this one is the shortest. So one is the subject there, is the verb. So you have a subject-verb combination, and everything else qualifies as the predicate, so you have another complete sentence. So the transition needs to be punctuated with a semicolon and then followed by a comma. Introduced with a semicolon and then followed by a comma. Whereas the second example, there are, however, three different routes we can take. There's just one sentence there. There are three different routes we can take. So the however is now interrupting the flow of one sentence. It's occurring mid-sentence. So we need to surround it with commas and treat it as a parenthetical clause. If you have any questions, then please let me know. It should be noted as well, I'm going to just go back for a second. Semicolons, one of the main overarching rules is that semicolons must separate two complete sentences. I could spell. They must separate two independent clauses, but we know independent clauses are complete sentences. Colons are more flexible. They can separate dependent from independent clauses, independent from dependent clauses, and then independent combinations. You can't have two dependent clauses together because then you won't have, neither of them will be an independent clause to make the whole thing a complete sentence. So you need at least one independent clause in the combination. But there are three possibilities with colons, but semicolons require two independent clauses. And oftentimes that's a good giveaway as to which you have to choose. If you don't have two independent clauses, then your only option really in that situation is the colon, because it allows you can punctuate it between an independent dependent or dependent independent combination. Just wanted to point that out. It's a helpful distinction. Okay, colons. Rule number one, a colon is used to introduce a list, but never after a verb or a preposition. Now, it's not necessary for the SAT or ACT that you can readily identify words as by their word parts or their labels, the grammatical labels. But it is helpful just to know in general, because you're going to have to learn some of these rules, and so the words are going to come up again and again in your English courses. So prepositions and conjunctions are similar to one another. They just operate on different scales. So conjunctions separate ideas. Those are like for, and, nor, or, but, yet. So all of those words separate clauses from each other. So large general ideas. Prepositions show relationships between nouns, between items, singular things. One colloquialism that this is not like an exhaustive definition. There's a lot of prepositions that don't meet this this kind of test, but it's a useful memory aid. A preposition is anything that a bird can do to a bridge. So the boat can fly over the bridge, around the bridge, to the left of the bridge, through the bridge, under the bridge. Again, there's a lot of prepositions that don't qualify because that's physical movement, but that gives you an idea of what prepositions are. But they're the words like to, for, so they're going to be relating, they're going to be explaining or demonstrating a relationship between singular or multiple items rather than overarching ideas or general concepts that clauses represent. An individual clause should represent a thought unit, some concise statement that you're trying to express. Those would be separated with conjunctions. Prepositions are on a smaller scale. But you can use, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you want to use a colon, however you have an ending verb or an ending preposition, you can use the phrase the following to fix sentences that can't take colon as it's written. So, for example, if you have the sentence, I need, colon, milk, bread, milk, and cheese at the store. So need is a verb, so it's inappropriate here to have the colon following the verb need. So you would just simply, either you would remove the colon here because it's not necessary. You can just have the sentence, I need bread, comma, milk, comma, and cheese at the store. That's perfectly grammatically correct. But if you really wanted to use the colon, then you could say, I need the following items at the store, colon, bread, milk, and cheese. Then you're not following the colon with, or you're not preceding the colon with a verb or preposition. Other examples, I bought the cake for, colon, mom, dad, and grandma. So for is a preposition here, so we can't follow the colon with a preposition. You can't follow a preposition with a colon, so you could just remove it. Oftentimes, the preposition does the same job that the colon does. It implies that there's going to be some type of listing, that there's some type of redefinition or additional information that's going to be added to the clause or that's following. That's what the preposition does too. So I bought the cake for mom, comma, dad, comma, and grandma is completely fine. And that's the more well-known rule for colons. The more advanced rule that comes up, it's a little bit more complicated, is rule number 2. And so a colon is used between two clauses when the second clause explains, redefines, or otherwise answers an implied question posed in the first clause. That sounds kind of strange, but if you see some examples, I think it becomes clearer. So, for example, he had one aim, colon, to finish by midnight. When you hear that first clause, he had one aim, there's an implied question in that clause, right? What was his aim? So you might hear it when somebody comes up to you and says he had one aim, you wonder to yourself, what was his aim? The second clause is answering that implied question with a redefinition, with an additional set of information. So the second example, there was one thing bothering him, colon, the back door won't lock. So when you hear the clause, there was one thing bothering him, that's a complete sentence, but it's missing some essential information, right? So it leads the reader to beg the question of what was bothering him. And the preceding clause is going to answer that direct implication. That's an ideal usage for punctuating with a colon. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look at some examples. I'm sorry, my iPad is being super slow today. There we go. Okay, so we have 6 sentences here. I'd like you to insert commas, semicolons, or colons as needed to make them grammatically correct. And let me decrease the camera size here so you can see all of them. If you have any questions at any point, then please let me know. I'm going to give you about a minute and a half per question, so that's 9 minutes. So I'll keep track of the time in the upper right, upper left hand corner. If you finish early, then feel free to take a short break. But after the 9 minutes is up, we'll go through them, and then we'll continue. We have about 4 practice sets that we can look at today. Right, so 9 minutes, and then we'll review. So I was just outlining some of these sentences for when we go through the review. So number one, there are 3 cows here. There are 4 horses over there. So there are 3 cows here. That's an independent clause. The subject is cows, and the verb is are. In the second clause, that's an independent clause as well. The verb is are. I just sneak it in there. I'm sorry. I apologize for that typo. And then the subject is horses. So we have 2 related independent clauses, so we can use a semicolon between them. So there needs to be a semicolon in between here and there. And that's separating 2 independent clauses. Number 2, I will be traveling through Freeport, Delaware, Frederick, Maryland, Arlington, Virginia, and Savannah, Georgia. So as it's written, it looks like there's 8 different locations, but we know that these are city-state combinations. So between the city-state combinations, instead of commas, we should use semicolons. Number 3, there are so many kinds of animals at the zoo: lions, tigers, bears, and penguins. So we're introducing a listing of items, a listing of animals. So we need a colon after the word zoo. Zoo is a noun, not a verb or a preposition, so it's completely fine to use the colon there. So colon, lions, comma, tigers, comma, bears, comma, and penguins. So then after that, we just have a simple comma series. We have a simple listing of individual items, in this case, types of animals. So we just use commas. Number 4, he has traveled a long time, although his journey is not finished. So you really have to diagram these sentences out. He has traveled a long time. That's an independent clause, a complete sentence. His journey is not finished. That's a complete sentence too, an independent clause. We have a subject, journey. We have a verb, is. So we have an independent clause. We have a complete sentence. So the transition, although, needs to occur between a semicolon, although, comma. For number 5, I can remember one thing very clearly: the scar above his left eye. So when you hear that first clause, I can remember one thing very clearly, you probably think to yourself, what do you remember very clearly? The second clause is answering that implied question, so that's the more advanced usage of the colon. So when the second clause explains, redefines, illustrates the first clause in some way. Actually, I should say mid-sentence. A transition mid-sentence. Struggling there. So number 6, we have a transition occurring mid-sentence. I am not, however, finished here. You can really hear that tone shift. So that's really indicative of that transition occurring mid-sentence. So either 2 commas or 2 dashes. But the 2 commas is more common. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look at the second practice set. So same directions, you're going to insert commas, semicolons, or colons into the following sentences as needed. I hope that there's no typos. I'll reread what I wrote to make sure. But otherwise, you have 9 minutes. Please look at the following sentences and then we'll review. Okay, so I just went ahead. There's such a delay with the iPad today. I just went ahead and solved these so then it wouldn't be, we wouldn't have to suffer through waiting it to catch up to us. So number one, he took a long time to write his paper, however, he still didn't receive a good grade. So you have to be careful in diagramming these clauses out. The first clause is an independent clause. He took a long time to write his paper. That can be its own sentence. He still didn't receive a good grade. That can also be a complete sentence. So we have a transition occurring between two sentences. The correct punctuation is going to be a semicolon transition, comma. So semicolon after paper, however, comma, he still didn't receive a good grade. Number two, we're introducing a list of tasks. Now, it doesn't matter that the lists are not singular words. They can be phrases as well. That's fine. So we're just going to have a simple series, comma series, but we're going to introduce them with a colon. I was asked to complete the following tasks, colon, wash the dishes, comma, sweep the floors, comma, and vacuum carpets, period. Number three, we have an example when the second clause explains the first clause. This is the more advanced usage of colons. So he realized that once what he forgot, you might be thinking to yourself, it begs of the question, what did he forget? His keys. That second clause explains, redefines, answers the implied question in the first. So we need a colon between forgot and his. Number four was testing the transition occurring mid-sentence. So 10 years later, however, they are still doing great business. So the essential one, the thought unit here is 10 years later, they are still doing great business. That's one complete sentence. So we have a transition occurring mid-sentence. That's appropriate to just be surrounded with commas. Either two commas or two dashes, but usually two commas. Number five, I love to run at night. It frightens her. So these are related independent clauses, so we can use a semicolon to separate them. And number six, I ship the boxes to the accounting department, comma, building 3, comma, human resources department, comma, building 5, comma, and housing department, comma, building 2. So these are not 6 separate locations. We have the label of what department it is, and then we have the building number where it's located. So it's just the format of the labeling system that they're particularly using here. So I ship the boxes to the accounting department, comma, building 3. That's one location. So then we use a semicolon after 3, and before human, is then we have human resources department, comma, building 5, semicolon, and housing department, comma, building 2, period. If you have any questions at all on anything we've done so far, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look at practice set C. So I'll give you another 9 minutes. And about halfway through, I'll start diagramming and answering the questions too, just so we don't have to wait for the live stream to catch up to us. But go ahead and look at these 6 questions, 9 minutes, and then we'll review. So number one is testing the introduction of a comma series or of a list, but we have a verb already. We have the verb are. We can't follow are. We can't follow a verb or preposition with a colon. So we just need to, it's fine, grammatically correct without the colon. Just simply remove it. So my favorite ice cream flavors are chocolate, rocky road, chocolate, comma, rocky road, comma, and strawberry. For number two, we have a transition occurring between two sentences. Oh, excuse me, I have that backwards, don't I? Number three is between two sentences, and number two is mid-sentence. I apologize. Got that turned around. Let me correct that. So this is a transition. Number two is a transition mid-sentence. And number three is a transition occurring between two sentences. Sorry about that. So number two, I will, comma, although, comma, take your claim to my supervisor. This is contrast to number three, where I took your claim to my supervisor, although it was rejected. So I took your claim to my supervisor, that's an independent clause. It was rejected, that's also an independent clause. So we're separating two independent clauses with a transition. So we need to use a comma, semicolon for the transition. So my supervisor, semicolon, although, comma, it was rejected. Number four, we're just separating two related complete sentences, so that's a semicolon. So he was 2 hours late, semicolon, she was 10 minutes early. Number five, we have a list of items that already contain commas in the item names or item labels. So they should be placed in the correct bin. So first of all, we're introducing a list, so actually that needs to have a comma there, a colon. So they should be placed in the correct bin, colon, document A, comma, blue bin, semicolon, document B, comma, red bin, semicolon, document C, comma, yellow bin, semicolon, and document D, comma, green bin, period. So you had two things going on in that one. We had a list, and then we also had items in a list that had commas already in them, like already contained commas. And lastly, number six, his reaction was powerful. He cried and shouted. So when we hear the clause, his reaction was powerful, how was it powerful? In what manner was it powerful? What made it powerful? So those are some questions that might be drawn to your mind when you hear that clause, and the second clause explains why they were powerful, because he cried and he shouted. So that's the uses of the colon. So his reaction was powerful, colon, he cried and shouted. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look at practice set D, and this will take us up to the end of today's class. I'm going to give you 9 minutes again, and about halfway through I'll start diagramming sentences, and with about a quarter of the time left I'll start solving all of the sentences, or giving you the answers. Okay, that should be there now. So 9 minutes, and then we'll review. Okay, so let's review these guys. So number one, I have one regret, colon, I should have packed more sandwiches. So when you hear I have one regret, it's begging the question, what is the regret? So the second clause is answering the implied question in the first. Number two, he is allergic to peanuts, latex, and penicillin. So we have a colon after a preposition that's inappropriate, so you just remove the colon and it's fine because the preposition does the same work as the colon. He's allergic to peanuts, latex, and penicillin is a complete grammatically correct sentence. Number three, I called, it was no use. So even though it's short, I called is a complete sentence. You have a subject, I, and you have a verb, called. So that's a complete sentence. It's an independent clause. So it was no use. That's an independent clause. They're related, so we're just going to separate them with a semicolon. Number four, a truck is blocking the road. However, we are looking for another route. A truck is blocking the road. That's a complete sentence, an independent clause. We are looking for another route. That's also a complete sentence. When we're separating two complete sentences, two independent clauses with a transition, the appropriate punctuation is going to be a semicolon, transition, comma. So we should have a truck is blocking the road, semicolon, however, comma, we are looking for another route. Number five, that contrasts with number four because now we have a transition occurring mid-sentence. So a truck, comma, however, comma, is blocking the road. You can really hear those in the shift of tone that they create, and that's really what the main reason that they're used for an author's purpose in including those declarative transitional words that occur in mid-sentence. Very effective at shifting the tone of a sentence. And number six had two things going on. So we had an introduction of a list, but that list was complex and it had values already containing commas in it. So we need to introduce the list with a colon, and then we need to separate items in the list that already contain commas with semicolons. So we're going to have the following businesses are down the hall, colon, Shipley Plumbing, comma, Suite 1, semicolon, Montel's Electrical Service, comma, Suite 2, semicolon, Arthur's Car Parts, comma, Suite 3, semicolon, and Doug's Taxi Service, comma, Suite 4, period. If you have any questions on anything that we've done today or any of these rules in general, then please let me know. I'm always here for you. You can drop a comment below, or you can find me on any of my social medias that are linked in the description below. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful night, and if you enjoy these videos, if you find them helpful, please like and subscribe, and thank you. I saw somebody liked the stream so far, so thank you very much. I appreciate you. Remember that today, if you hit the bell, then you'll be notified when I go live. I'm going to make up session 2 later tonight for the math session. So then we'll be right on track tomorrow to finish up this week's topic. If you have any questions, as always, like I said, just let me know. Otherwise, Dr. Todd, you want to say goodbye to everybody? Come on. You got to do your job. You say goodbye.